Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Shutter Sports Refresh. This is the weekly show that breaks down all of the most important news in sports for you in just 5 minutes. I'm your host Finn Noel, and let's get right into it with some basketball. That's right, it's March Madness, but now it's April, so I guess April Madness? Over the past weekend, the Final Four games went down and the championship game happened just tonight. But first, let's break down the Final Four or the semifinals, with the first game going down between the number 2 UConn and the number 3 Illinois. Now, if you remember from last week, UConn advanced to the Final Four on a ridiculous game-winning shot against Duke that will be remembered for years to come. And they continued that hot streak coming into the first half against Illinois. Now, Illinois tried their best to fight back, but at the end of the day, UConn was just too powerful and they advanced to the championship game. They were led by their center, Terrace Reed Jr., who finished that Final Four game with 17 points and 11 rebounds. Now, UConn has been absolutely dominant in March Madness over the past couple years, winning 2 championships in a row in 2023 and 2024. But they had quite the tough opponent to go up against in the championship game. That's right, it was the number 1 seed Michigan, led by their ginormous center, Ade Mara, who finished with 26 points in their Final Four game against Arizona. Now, Michigan dominated Arizona the entire way through that Final Four game and did the same to UConn in the first half of the championship game. Now, things were much closer in the second half of the championship game, but at the end of the day, Michigan was just too strong, and Ade Mara and his Michigan team ended up taking home the March Madness National Championship. Congratulations to Michigan and all their fans. But that's not all for March Madness, as the women's bracket also concluded this weekend. Now, the Final Four in the women's bracket was all 4 number 1 seeds. It was UConn taking on South Carolina and UCLA taking on Texas. Now, UConn were the favorites coming into the tournament, but they found a tough opponent in South Carolina. In a shocking second half comeback, South Carolina ended up taking down the Huskies to advance to the national championship. And that ruined what would have been an awesome time for UConn fans, as they could have had both their men's and women's team in the national championship game. And the other game between UCLA and Texas was just as tough of a battle. Now, UCLA has only lost 1 game all season, and they kept up that dominant performance against Texas. Although it was a close one, Lauren Betts for UCLA scored 16 points, and that helped them advance to the national championship game. And in the national championship, you would expect things to be close, but no, it was UCLA absolutely dominating, winning 79-51 over South Carolina. And this time, it was Gabriela Jaquez Jr., the sister of current NBA player Jaime Jaquez Jr., who finished with 21 points and 10 rebounds to lead her team to the women's national championship. And this was UCLA's first ever national championship on the women's side, so congratulations to them. And it's sad to say that March Madness is now over for this year. We can't wait for it to come back around next year, though. Let's move into some soccer now, where the last 6 spots for the World Cup qualifications got filled up over the past week. That's right, everyone's favorite soccer tournament is coming up this summer, and it's coming up fast. Now, 4 of those 6 spots were filled from the UEFA League, so European teams. Now, first up, it was Italy taking on their Baltic neighbors in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now, despite Italy being a super strong country for football, they haven't made the last 3 World Cups, and they continue to struggle. Despite a hot start for Italy, scoring in the first 15 minutes, Bosnia ended up taking control of the game and clinching that World Cup spot. This marks the 2nd appearance ever in the country's history. Moving on to the other games now, Sweden took down Poland 3-2, so they took one of those spots. Then Turkey took down Kosovo 1-0, and Czechia took down Denmark in a game that went to penalties. And finally, those final 2 spots were filled in the Interconfederation pathway. Now, because the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Iraq were both the top seeds, all they needed to do was win 1 game to advance. And luckily, both of those teams did, so Democratic Republic of the Congo and Iraq also qualify for the World Cup. So now we know every team that's playing in the World Cup this summer, and we can only wait for the start. And for our last piece of news this week, let's break down some WNBA news, as they just had an expansion draft to allow in 2 new teams. Now, an expansion draft is essentially where these new teams get to pick from a pool of players that the rest of the teams in the league decide. And those 2 new teams were the Portland Fire and the Toronto Tempo. There are protections on who they can pick and who they can't pick. So it might be a slow start for these 2 teams, but we're super excited to see how they succeed in the future. The WNBA season is kicking into gear now, with the draft and free agency coming up, so we'll keep you updated if there's any more news. And that will do it for this week's episode of the Shutter Sports Refresh. I've been your host, Finn Noel, and I hope you learned something today. You can check me and our writer, Lucky Roberts, out on Instagram, right below my head. And make sure to follow the Shutter Sports Refresh account on Instagram, where we give you breaking and daily news, not just weekly updates. Thanks for watching.